Greetings. It is Monday, March the 30th, in the rather infamous year in the making of 2026. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Well, the world continues to go through a shock of sorts, and misinformation all over is flying even more frequently than Iranian drones or American fighter planes. My. Well, first off, there are so many people commenting on the Trump administration not having a strategy. How can they be certain of that? In fact, I tend to doubt that. The strategy might not be perfect, it might not be foolproof, and it might not even be any good, but it's still something they planned out. They didn't just do this on a whim. The U.S. military doesn't do that. People in the U.S. military are very career-minded. They don't just blindly obey orders in spite of what so many people think. First off, they can't answer to an illegal order. If a four-star general walks into a nuclear weapons locker and there's a sergeant on duty guarding it and he keeps insisting that he be allowed in, he would be very politely arrested and told, "Excuse me, sir, you're under arrest, sir." That's the way things really work in this world. So we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but unfortunately so many of these talking heads on YouTube and Rumble and other such places aren't willing to admit that. But one thing I can say for sure is people in the U.S. military have a job. A lot of them are very well trained, and even if they're given a crazy mission, they're going to come up with the best possible solution. They do not blindly obey orders, in spite of what so many people like to think, especially the Democratic Party, which has turned out to be the party of treason in the United States. Now, first off, I am not a person who would have gone for a war with Iran. I would have had a long-term plan to subvert that rather evil administration of that country, if you can call it that. Regime is a more appropriate term, of course. And over time, overthrow it. That's something that should have been started back in 1979 under Jimmy Carter. Cursed be his name. But no, we've gotten distracted over the years, and as a result, the world is a lot worse place because of something called Islamic fundamentalism, which all originated in that once beautiful, proud, and civilized country. We're seeing people in information gathering and news reporting putting their own agendas before what should be the proper communication to the masses as to what's going on. Now, let's just take a look at what is actually happening. The U.S. is still hitting Iran. It was never a ceasefire. It was an agreement not to hit their power plants, but they started doing that. Tehran was thrown into darkness, and according to reports coming from the ground there, which if you know where to find them, you can get, including video, they're not winning. The Iranians are not winning. People might think they're not winning by not surrendering or not giving in or claiming that they're winning, but they're not. The U.S. and Israel have pretty much pounded that place far more effectively and far more ruthlessly and far more decisively than was generally perceived by a lot of these talking heads, which usually belong to people from an earlier generation where things were done quite differently. This is not the late 80s, early 90s, folks. This is a very different time. It isn't even the early 2000s. And it's amazing to see what they're able to get done there. Now, one of the other things about oil and fertilizer, we're hearing about famine because of fertilizer not coming through the Straits of Hormuz. Well, if you've looked at the calendar lately, it's March, and planting is about happening now. That means fertilizer has already been purchased, obtained, and in many cases, if not most, tossed out on fields. So no, there's not going to be a famine. If after a couple of years, maybe, but it's not true. Now, one of the other things about the Straits of Hormuz is what's really causing the blocking of ships going through is insurance. Yes. If the insurance companies, and that's usually Lloyd's of London or something along those lines, tell the ships, so we're not going to cover you if you go through there, they don't move. It's hard to imagine how Iran is actually doing that. They're just declaring that it's closed. Ships are going nowhere. That's what's really going on, and I've gotten that from some very reliable sources. Yeah, they do have missiles, they have fired a few, but they basically say, well, don't go through. The insurance companies are not going to insure the ships if they get hit, so they sit around and wait. That's what's going on. Now, where is this all going to go? We don't know what the overall strategy is. And militaries and governments tend to not reveal that to the public. But one of the other things we keep hearing, and this is something liberals like to talk about, is this is a war for oil. Okay, and let me ask you something. What's wrong with the war for oil? I'm not saying I love oil or a petroleum-based civilization like what we have, but we do have that. It's a petroleum-based civilization. And we humans, war being something we do quite often and have ever since we've been around and started throwing sticks and stones at each other from each other's cave entrances, well, we tend to go to war over resources. I don't know what the strategy is, but I guarantee that the Americans and Israelis are looking to have a very friendly country when this is all over, called Iran, that will provide them with all sorts of oil and basing for military uses and all sorts of wonderful things. The Gulf states also, they're probably looking forward to an era of stability without crazy people building intercontinental ballistic missiles and trying to get nuclear weapons. At the end of the day, humans, people, men in the Middle East, they just want to make money and have a good time, unless you're a religious fanatic. But really, what's wrong with a war about oil? Really? I mean, all you people with electric cars, much of those cars are made out of petroleum. The roads we drive on are made out of petroleum. The packages our food comes in, they're all made out of petroleum. That's what plastic is. It's a petroleum product. Artificial carpeting at the Super Bowl is petroleum. Your kids' lunchboxes are made out of petroleum. A lot of our clothes are made out of petroleum. So securing a supply of petroleum, that's kind of important. And just turning your nose up at it, think you can go live in a tree, well, probably not. A lot of our drugs are made from petroleum. We cook with gas that is also a petroleum byproduct. So I want to stop hearing all this stuff about oil being evil. Our civilization completely runs on petroleum. I mean, there's environmentalists on remote islands in the Pacific like Hawaii that think that they can get by without petroleum. Hawaii would not exist without petroleum. Who's going to fly on an electric plane? Not going to happen. And even then, where's the electricity come from? Those big, enormous bird choppers you see on the tops of hills or offshore. The ones that drive the whales crazy and kill migratory birds and all these other things that are flying around and don't really generate that much electricity at the end of the day. No. Look, the world runs a certain way. And to think that it's one big pile of marshmallow fluff with cherries on top is just ridiculous. Granted, Israel has far too much influence over the United States, which some people are calling the United States of Israel. They were allowed to build a nuclear weapon, or many nuclear weapons, and don't tell me that that didn't destabilize the political situation in the Middle East and make all the people in the Middle East want to have nuclear weapons. Here's the deal. Right now, like it or not, the U.S. is engaged in a war to destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran without destroying its people or that much of its infrastructure. And again, I've known many Iranians over the years, and I'm still in touch with them. And you know what? They're all elated that this is going on. Now, is this affecting world petroleum markets? You betcha. Is it affecting American petroleum prices? Yes, but not because we get any oil through the Straits of Hormuz. We get almost nothing from that part of the world right now. That's just good old-fashioned American price gouging when they can get away with it. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Now, the other thing, too, that we're seeing are all of these stories about Trump being taken out of office because of the 25th Amendment. That's the amendment that was passed, I believe it was 1967, that if the president becomes incapacitated or incapable of fulfilling his duties, the cabinet basically votes on it or comes up with a recommendation to the Congress, and the vice president steps in. That's designed in case somebody goes brain dead or is having an operation that he might not survive or something. No, I don't think that's going to happen at all. If it did, it would be a coup. And even though J.D. Vance does seem to be a little bit too much in the back pocket of the what is generally referred to as the globalist New World Order types, I don't think they're that brave to do this. Trump, although he is not my favorite person and a lot of things he's doing I don't agree with, he's trying to correct things that have been left to languish for decades. He's trying to do it very quickly. He's trying to do it while he's in office. I do not disagree with him in that regard. There's a big mess in the United States that needs to be fixed. We're dealing with crazy insanity, transgenderism that people think is normal and natural. It's just something that's been discovered. Wokeism, feminism that has gone so far over the top. Susan B. Anthony could generate enough electricity for Manhattan with how fast she's spinning in her grave. U.S. is in a very bad way because of, well, over-tolerance. Sounds like a strange term, but it's true. The U.S. has to win. U.S. and Israel, I guess, although I think the U.S. is doing most of the work. The U.S. has to win this war with Iran. It has to replace that regime. If it doesn't, it is going to be the worst thing it could be. Meanwhile, people are still sniping at anything that Trump does. Well, the ballroom, yes, great idea. Probably the best idea he's had. The United States didn't have a very decent place to have state dinners, tents in the mud. And I never attended a state dinner at the White House. I have had friends who have, and they said it was the most miserable thing they've had to encounter in Washington. The ballroom was a great idea. It's 150 years overdue. Just like that big arch they've been thinking about putting over on the Arlington side of the Memorial Bridge. That's been talked about for, I believe it goes back before the Civil War. They were going to put something there. Maybe I could be wrong with that, but it's been around for a long time. No, nobody's interested in the truth right now. People are interested in making predictions of doom and gloom because disaster porn can be more profitable than the regular kind, let's face it. Same reason people love to rubberneck near very nasty automobile accidents. Everybody wants to be distracted from all the mundane things they have to address every day and have to deal with. Your kids with their homework, paying your taxes, going out and making sure your car's working. Well, let me tell you what, folks, if you really have no control over something, if you have no power to change things, it's a good idea to remain informed, but don't waste a single moment worrying about it. It just ages you, it makes you miserable, and as a result, you're going to miss an awful lot of the real fun stuff. We had a terrible war going on in Vietnam, but at the same time, we were traveling to the moon. Which do you think was much more pleasant to focus on when you really had no control over either event? That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, and make sure they're worthy to be enemies, because sometimes enemies are confused with people you just don't like. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is AurelianColumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant. And remember, Clown World, the deep state, and the Islamic Republic of Iran, along with all crazed fundamentalist religious types, must be destroyed. Good day.